God who rage quit and flooded the world and preaches forgiveness and lost his mind over an apple. Come on now. Sorry.
Yeah, he left. Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear
Yeah,
me? You can hear me?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So cool, he left.
The
How's it?
echo chamber.
No, it's all
Hello?
good.
But you know I host these all the time. This is my jam.
Good. Gotcha. Yeah, it's probably gonna be the last guest. I don't think I have anyone else. Gail, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me on your panel. I'm 23, male. And let's just get right to the meat and potatoes of this debate.
Yeah, sure. I think I have better morals than Yahweh, and I think you will also have better morals than Yahweh.
So,
Disagree?
yeah. So I guess my first line of questioning then would just be, where do you draw your morality from?
I draw more morality from things like consequences, degrees of harm, equality, and what's the other thing I was gonna say? Consequences, degrees of harm, equality, and human well-being. Basically, everything that an empathetic person should agree with. Empathy,
So,
essentially.
okay, I guess those are multiple different points. I'll just target consequentialism, for example. What makes a consequence objectively good or bad from a moral standpoint?
Whether it has the other ones like its harm is degrees of basically it's degrees of harm and whether it has pro or antisocial results.
Yeah, well, I guess would you describe yourself as a utilitarian then?
Um, you would have to explain what that means because I might know the language, but I might not have the
Okay,
word to actually put onto it.
basically utilitarian, and there's multiple different forms of it, but essentially utilitarianism is whatever produces the most happiness, whatever utilizes the most happiness, we should put for policy, and we should promote for ethics.
For the most part, yeah. That depend on the consequences, but yeah, for the most part.
Okay, yeah, and I guess my next question then is: do you subscribe to like the secular humanist manifestos?
The what?
The secular humanist manifestos published by the American Atheist Organization, I believe. That's what they're called.
Yeah, I agree with most of it. I agree with it mostly. Yeah, from what I read.
Okay. So, I guess my next question then is, where do you draw that human? I actually, just so I make sure I steelman your position before I actually get into the objection. Would you say that human flourishing should be the goal of ethics then?
Like human flourishing. Yeah, I would say yeah, that's the goal. We
Okay,
want to flourish as much as possible
I guess then the question is like, why is that good versus say humans not actually flourishing? Like, why is that objectively better?
because we see the consequences of it when humans don't flourish, like people are worse off.
Yeah, but that's an is statement. I'm just asking for an ought. Like, why ought we have to have humans flourish versus ought not having humans flourish? That makes sense.
Because of the instinct.
The no, well, it's a descriptive, but you're trying to make a prescriptive statement then that's saying that essentially that, oh well, humans flourishing is a good thing, but that you're not providing
No,
an
I'm not.
actual justification beyond it just makes me feel good.
I think that's really all the justification of that. Well, that's not all the justification. No, really, my bad. Okay, human flourishing should be good because we see the consequences of what happens when humans do flourish. More people are alive. There's less crime. There's less harm being caused. So human flourishment has pro social consequences.
Yeah, and I guess my question is, why should we have pro social consequences, not antisocial consequences?
Because I don't want to live in that type of world where we're suffering.
So it's your subjective viewpoint ultimately.
I think it's everyone's viewpoint. Do you want to live in a world where we suffer?
No, I know a couple of people that have told me
Yeah,
directly.
exactly.
I don't. No. I said no. Not everyone agrees with that. Most people may agree with that, but that's not a good epistemological justification for any sort of position. Is appeal to popularity. Obviously, there are some people
I'm
out there
not
who
trying to appeal
believe.
to pop. I'm not
Yeah,
trying to appeal to popularity. What I'm saying is that for the most part, human beings don't want to suffer. So
yeah. And what I'm
for
saying is that there's some people out there who would actually argue against that. And what's your actual moral justification against them then?
for them they want more human suffering.
Yeah, some people do.
Yeah, I agree with that. So there are some people who want to watch the world burn and they want more human suffering, but like the way that human beings have evolved, that's not preferable. And anyone who tries to do that, we remove them from our society.
Well, I don't think evolution is necessarily a good standard for morality because evolution, there's a constant rate of change that you're attributing to it. If you're trying to
Yeah,
base
correct.
your
But when it comes to a social species, what social species try to do as every social species tries to make their group flourish and have be pro-social as much as possible. There's
okay,
no social species that they want everyone else to be harmed. Like none of them operate that way.
so I guess just a clarifying question then, would you I guess would you base your morality on evolution?
It's not really evolution. It's basically empathy. And if you ask me where empathy comes from, we evolved it because we're a social species.
Yeah. So then that kind of just then says that's just a long way of saying yes then because it's like okay, why do we have empathy? Because it benefits us evolutionarily speaking. So it does come from evolution. So that just kind
It
of
comes
begs
from
the
evolution,
question.
yeah.
Yeah. So that just begs the question. Evolution's constantly in change. Say, for example, if there's some sort of evolutionary need to where we have to lose empathy to flourish more as a species, would you agree with losing empathy then?
I probably won, but that's just subjective to me.
Well, if it's ultimately subjective, then why are you making objective moral claims that your morality is better than God? It doesn't make sense.
Because my Mara is better than him because he promoted harm, and I don't.
Yeah, but you haven't provided an actual like objective uh reason of why we should oppose harm. Your whole background, I'll just grant
because
you just for the purpose
because
of
we
this
don't
argument.
because we don't prefer it. Literally, that's it.
Yeah. If we just don't prefer it, but say someone does prefer it, you have two paradigms now clashing that are diametrically opposed to each other. Which one's actually true?
The one that which one is actually what do you mean which one is actually true?
Yeah. So say for example, I come from a paradigm that says that harm is not objectively evil, and your paradigm says yes, it is evil. Which one is objectively true? Then you can't have two opposing positions that are both objectively true. That violates the law of the excluded
Oh,
middle.
oh yeah, right. Neither would be objectively true at that point.
Wait, so then why are you making an objective
It
truth
would just
statement? Or excuse me, objective
it would
moral
just be
statement.
on what we prefer at that point.
Yeah.
What most people prefer at that point.
Yeah, well then again, that's A, an appeal to popularity, and B, it's ultimately just an appeal to subjectivity. You can't make an objective moral statement about something you ultimately would agree that is subjective. That's just kind of that's
I feel
silly.
like no, I'm no, I'm making objective observations because objectively, you already said that yes, some things do cause harm like rape and slavery. Those things
Yeah.
objectively cause harm. So I'm making objective statements. If I'm saying that yes, these things objectively cause harm, and if you say that you don't care, that's fine that you don't care. But as a society, we care about what causes harm and what doesn't. So at that point it doesn't matter what you would think unless you're part of another society that says we like to have more harm, but your society won't survive long after that.
Well, I mean that's not necessarily true. In terms of just your last
Yeah,
point,
it
real
is.
quick,
You have
and
to work together.
no,
You
no,
have
no,
to
no.
work
Let me
together.
let me let me make the argument real quick. So
Sure.
this is a bit of unrelated tangent, so I'll keep it quick. But there's definitely, I would say, majority of human history, societies did use a lot of harm. Obviously, you have like the Aztecs, for example, with the human unalivings to their gods. You obviously have the European colonization, which inflicted massive amounts of harm upon the native populations, etc., etc. So obviously, harm when utilized by society can actually cause that society to flourish. I'm not necessarily advocating for that. Obviously, that's just a separate diatribe. And to get back on topic now, at least, again, you're still not providing an objective reason of why we should oppose harm beyond either A, the majority is opposed to it, B, it's based off of evolution, which is constantly subjectively change or is objectively changing constantly, or C, just it's your own personal feelings, which then it is subjective, which then begs the question of okay, if morality is subjective, then why are you trying to make objective moral claims about something that's ultimately subjective and doesn't objectively exist? It's silly.
So yeah, like morals don't objectively exist, right? Yeah, you're right. It's all basically our opinions. Like there's no objective morals. I agree with you there. But like for like so if you were to say that like I have no objective reason for saying that we could oppose harm because the majority of us don't want it, that's really is the objective reason. Most of us don't want it.
Yeah, but that's like I said before, that's the appeal to popularity. And like for example, majority of people used to believe the Earth is flat and used to believe that the Earth was the center of the universe, which both are obviously not true. So that reasoning doesn't follow.
No, they're the what like the reasoning still still false because we're not talking about like an objective thing like the Earth being the center of the universe.
Okay, so then that just begs the question then, if morality is subjective, then why are you trying to make objective moral statements about what is objectively the best path of morality? That's like me, for example, saying
Because I'm
pizza
making
is
objective right, because the thing is I'm making objective observations that you already agreed with.
yeah, well, I can't agree with those statements that obviously grape, slavery, etc. They all cause harm, but that still doesn't provide the ought. That still doesn't provide the reason why we should reduce harm. Because
Because
ultimately
we
it's
don't
just
prefer it. We
yeah,
we
because we
don't
don't
prefer it
prefer it. Okay, so then it's two preferences. These preferences disagree. Why are you trying to push your preferences upon, say, Christians, for example, who would obviously disagree with you and say God is the objective standard of morality?
because of the consequences.
Oh, what consequences?
We've seen the consequences of what of like basically fundamentalist Christianity, not even fundamentalist Christianity, just in a like for example, like I've always said, my parents are from the Caribbean, right?
Hmm.
Like that society operates almost totally from a biblical frame of view. Homosexuals are in danger for their lives down there. So I've seen the consequences of what happens when we go through this frame of view. So the consequences are there. If I see that it has negative social consequences, why would I prefer that?
Yeah,
And you don't
and
have to follow what I said. I'm not trying to push anything. I'm just discussing stuff. I'm just discussing stuff. You don't have to follow what I say. If you don't care what I say, then you don't care.
well, obviously, I'm up here to disagree with you, so I don't think you're necessarily trying to convince me or trying to convince your audience, and I'm doing the same exact thing, obviously, right? So we could both agree to that at least. But ultimately, though, that still doesn't answer the question because at least within the Christian paradigm, we have that objective source of morality. We have objective morals. We can make an objective moral statement saying, for example, hey, homosexuality is bad, for example, or say atheism is bad, etc., etc. You, though, because ultimately you would agree that morality is ultimately subjective, you can't make an objective moral statement saying Christianity is bad because it causes more harm to X group, say, like you mentioned before, homosexuals, because
Well, I never
morality is
said that
ultimately subjective.
Christianity. My bad. Okay, my bad for interrupting. I didn't say Christianity in of itself is a bad thing. That's not what I'm saying. My 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 opinion is that from if we see a biblical moral framework how it actually works in society, I see what harm that it can cause, and that is not just Christianity. That could be almost any religion. We're seeing that with Hinduism over in India right now, and we see it in Buddhism with Myanmar. When when religious fervor takes over, it always leads to harm of other human beings. That always happens objectively. So, like, if I don't want harm of other human beings, if I want an increase of well-being, of human well-being, then I'm not going to agree with religious fervor being the main frame view of society. That's the first thing. But the second thing I would say is that I don't agree that Christians have objective morals either. What they have is a dictate from a deity that we don't know actually exists.
So I guess
Because like I'm sorry, let me just add one last thing. I'm sorry.
no worries, no worries. I know you're
Because like
finished.
for example, the example that you brought up with homosexuality. Yeah, sure, your deity says that it's wrong, but that doesn't give me a reason to care, or does it show why it's wrong in the first place? He just doesn't like it.
You done? I just don't want to interrupt you.
No problem. What I would say is that from if I analyze that, then I don't think Christians have an objective morals either. They just have the dictates of a deity. That's all you have. Not really a system of objective morals.
So I would actually respond to saying that God's nature. Second point first. At least within the Christian worldview, most Christians would hold to this view that God's nature is objectively good. He is unchanging, and by definition, he would be perfect in all aspects, which would include morality. And again, to get back to the first point about, okay, well, we see in, like, Arabia, for example, with Islam, Myanmar with Buddhism, India with Hinduism, the Americas with Christianity, et cetera, that, there's harm and suffering caused by these religions. You still haven't given me an ought of why harm should be avoided by society beyond it personally offends you and personally offends the majority of people. Like we've already agreed to, obviously, to a pure appeal to popularity is not a valid argument. And
No, and
ultimately, yeah. And ultimately, though, the debate is about I have better morals than Yahweh. So whether or not Yahweh, whether or not God is actually true or not, it is not relevant to this debate. What is relevant is your morality being better, and that's an objective moral statement. But ultimately, you're making an objective moral statement, an objective statement about morality, which you hold to be subjective and not actually real. That's where the confusion comes in.
right, but I've already explained this from a subjective standpoint. I can make objective observations, which you've already agreed with, and you've asked me that I haven't given you the odd. I have given you the odd. We don't prefer it. Now you're saying that that's just a appeal to popularity. An 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 appeal to popularity in this case would be valid because again there is no world where PDF files, like where the world would prefer PDF files. You know what I'm saying? And if the world did prefer PDF files, that's causing massive harms on children. I don't see why we would prefer that.
Yeah, and obviously, just from a subjective viewpoint, I think most people would agree with obviously PDF files being bad for obvious reasons because it harms children. But ultimately, you're still not giving the ought of why harming is objectively wrong. Instead, you have said, okay, it's ultimately subjective from my subjective worldview, which ultimately, okay, so if it's
Okay,
subjective,
harming is ultimately wrong because we know what harm does.
what, that it hurts people?
It hurts people. Why
Mm-hmm.
would we prefer that?
So yeah, and I guess, like, why should nihilists care if it hurts people? Ultimately, as you said before, it is subjective, and also depending on what you mean by hurt, some people may actually say that sometimes a little bit of pain goes a long way towards improving someone's moral characters. Obviously, like for example, you do something bad to a society as a kid. I don't know, say you're playing baseball and you throw the ball in someone's window and the window breaks, right? And then
Mhm.
you get shamed, maybe get grounded for a couple weeks. You have to do a summer job to pay it off. But hey, that shaming and you being forced to do that job went a wrong way. Went a long way. Excuse me. That would be, I guess, subjectively good in your worldview. Then, because now that person has the ethics of hard work, which can provide for society.
Right, but like remember, I'll always say the degrees of harm. Breaking someone's window does is not the same. It's not on the same level as a PDF file touching a child. Those are way different degrees of harm.
We're
Well,
talking
how?
about trauma, and that's just like when people say, "Oh, they went through trauma that made them strong." When they didn't need to be strong, they need to be safe. Like we're talking about things like things that cause trauma.
So, but
Right.
ultimately,
I mean,
what's
the thing is, if you're saying ultimately, why should we be against harm because it hurts people, and you're saying why should we be against what hurts people, is that we've seen the consequences of what happens when people are hurt. When people go through trauma, when people are hurt, when we have things like slavery and genocide, we've seen the consequences of those things, and the consequences are always negative. So we should be against negative things happening. Why should we not be?
negative to
Now,
say
if you're
maybe
gonna
the
ask me, if you're gonna ask me why should a nihilist care, I'm gonna tell you he shouldn't. It doesn't matter if the nihilist cares or not.
so
But
then
if we
you
if we want to, if it's gonna depend on what type of society do we want to live in. Do you want to live in a society where people are raping, have slavery, and genocide? If you want to live in that type of society, go ahead and try to start one. It's not gonna be successful.
No, I obviously I wouldn't argue for society, and right now we're not necessarily debating about society. I mean, if we want to get on a topic, we can, and I have arguments against atheism from that standpoint too. But right now, I'm just looking for justification of why we ought to avoid harm beyond it personally harms my worldview. I personally don't like people breaking windows all the way up to trauma,
No,
PDF files, geocide, etc.
again. It's not anything personal. We see the objective consequences of these things. They always have negative consequences.
Yeah, but
Always.
you're not understanding the objection. I'm objecting to why should I actually care about that? And it seems like you've ceded the
You
debate when you
shouldn't. Go
say,
go.
Yeah. Well,
You
then,
should care about it. But the question is not
but no,
about
you
whether or
just
not you should care.
when I brought up the moral nihilist, you ceded that okay, we shouldn't. The moral nihilist doesn't care. They don't actually have to care. So then
They
it's
don't
like,
have
oh,
to.
okay,
No, but
okay,
that's not the question. You don't have to care. That's not my point at all. You don't
yeah.
have to care. It's not about you
Then,
caring.
well, then obviously that's just the logical entailment of your philosophy of moral subjectivity, which then also then entails that I shouldn't actually care if you have
Yeah,
better morals than God or not, even if you objectively did. Like, why should I
you
care?
shouldn't. Why should I care about yours?
Because my morality is objectively true, I would argue, but that's not necessarily related to debate right now.
Let's say it
But
is. Why should I care?
because God said so.
I don't care. Fuck God.
Okay. I mean, if you
There
want
you
to
go.
say that,
You know what I'm
if you
saying?
want
So
to
it's
say
like
that,
we're
no,
at the
no,
we're
no,
at the
no,
tail
no,
end
no,
of
wait, 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 wait,
we're
wait.
basically at the tail end of this because I have no reason to care about Yahweh either.
Well, I mean, like I said before, and again, I don't want to turn this to is God real debate because that's completely off topic to the prompt.
Right, right.
But
I understand, but what I'm saying
yeah,
is that if you're gonna ask me why should a nihilist care about mine,
yeah,
and I see to you that it doesn't matter, they shouldn't, and you're
yeah.
gonna say, oh, well, that makes my entire thing a wash. I'm gonna ask you the same thing. Why should I care about yours? I don't care about God either. So it's like we're both reaching the same conclusion. Like you
No,
don't have to
no,
care about mine. I don't have to care about yours.
no. It doesn't reach the same conclusion because I can actually make objective moral claims. You cannot. By your
Sure, I
own
can.
admission, you can't. So, and that
No,
then
you
you have
can't.
that.
You can't
But
either.
no, no,
Which
no.
what because this go back to what I was saying in the beginning. Even if God does exist, it's still even His morals are still subjective because they're subject to they're dependent on God, right?
And like I said before, God's nature is all perfect, at least within most religious worldviews. God's nature is perfect, being that he has all the omni properties of omniscient, omnipotency, eternal existence without beginning and end, etc., etc., etc. That means, by definition, since he is unchanging, he would have to be perfect, including his morality would have to be perfect as well, by definition.
Also, slavery is fine then.
That's not related to the argument, because
Yeah, it is
no, it's
because
not, because you
He
haven't.
said it is because He said He can do it.
Well, you haven't provided an objective reason why I should actually not care for slavery. Then, like I don't know if you listened to the beginning of the debate. I
Wait,
already
hold,
stated
hold on. So when I asked you slavery is fine, then you're okay with slavery.
if God actually commanded that to be a universal thing, I would have to by divine command theory. But that's not my position. It's not the
Right.
Christian position either.
That's why I've said I have better morals than Yahweh
Sure. And
because I
what
don't
is
agree
your
with some.
what
That's why I
is
said
your
I don't agree with some. I don't
okay?
agree with something that
Okay.
causes
And
so
why
much
is
harm
slavery objectively wrong then?
because it causes harm.
And why should I care about harm?
It doesn't matter if you
I
care about
shouldn't
it or
care. I
not.
shouldn't care. So if I
No,
shouldn't care,
but the thing is, hold
if
on,
I
hold on, wait.
shouldn't, no,
But
wait.
Gail,
Yeah.
your question that you asked was why should you why is slavery objectively wrong? And I said it causes harm. That's the answer. Saying why should you care is a completely different subject.
No,
It
it's
doesn't matter
not.
if you
It's
care or
not at
not.
all.
It's objectively wrong because it causes harm. Whether
And
you care
again, I'm
about harm or
asking for
not
just.
has nothing. Hold on, wait. Whether you care about harm or not has nothing to do with that.
It totally is relevant because your whole justification of why I should care about slavery being wrong or not comes from it
I didn't say
causes
you should
harm.
care about it. I didn't say you should care about it. I didn't say anything about you caring about it. The question that you asked was why is it objectively wrong?
Yes.
It's objectively wrong because
That
it
was my
causes
question.
harm. Whether
Yes.
you care about harm, hold on, whether you care about harm is irrelevant. It causes harm.
It's not relevant because that's your justification
Does it
of
cause harm?
slavery is wrong.
Does it
Exactly.
cause harm?
That's my
Hold on.
question to you.
My question is, does it cause harm?
Yes, slavery obviously
That's
causes
why.
harm.
Hold on, wait, stop. If slavery causes harm, that's why it's wrong. You caring about that is irrelevant.
No, it's not. It's not irrelevant at all because you haven't provided
It is relevant
justification
because
for
harm
why
doesn't matter.
harming human beings is
Harm
wrong.
is not based on whether we care about it.
No. You
Harm is
haven't
harm.
provided justification for why harming human beings is objectively wrong.
I haven't provided a justification for why harming human beings is objectively wrong.
Yes, and you seem as a moral
It has a negative
subjectivist, you have ceded to
consequence.
me that.
It has a negative consequence.
Okay, and why is having a negative
Objective-
consequence objectively wrong?
The negative consequence is the object. What are you talking about?
That's the whole question. You're saying, oh, this objectively causes harm, therefore it has a negative consequence, therefore it's wrong. Okay, why? Why is it objectively wrong?
Because it has a negative consequence. What are we talking about?
Well, that's a circular. That's circular then. Okay, harm is wrong because of the negative consequence. Negative consequences are wrong because it causes harm. That's a circular argument. Like, you haven't provided an actual justification for why slavery is wrong. I could say slavery is objectively wrong from a Christian view because it harms God's image, which is humanity.
But God said to do it.
You're entirely correct about that within the confines of
Exactly.
Old Testament. Wait,
So
hold up, because you're making a false equivocation fallacy. Slavery
no,
back
I'm
in
not.
slavery back in the day of Old Testament Judaism was, and the Roman Empire was not the same type of slavery that was experienced in the America,
Wrong.
for example, right?
That's wrong.
It's
That's
not
wrong. It
wrong.
was.
No, it's
They
Was the
not.
owned
slavery in
people as
America?
they
Hold
owned
on.
other
Was the
people
slavery
as
in
property.
That
Yeah? Was
that
the slavery in America chattel?
In America, yeah, it was just pure chattel. But
In America, it was chattel. In ancient Israel, was it chattel?
I would say definitely in ancient Israel and in
It was.
Rome too. In Rome too,
Yeah,
they
it was exactly.
slaves
So
had more
it was the
privileges and
same
rights
thing.
than America.
No,
And
they did not.
regardless of
No, they did
that,
not. No, they're not. They were. It was
regardless of
chattel. It was
that, you have the
chattel.
old covenant versus the new covenant as well.
It was chattel slavery. No, I don't care about old covenant versus new covenant. You just said
It's
God isn't
entirely
changing.
irrelevant. It's
Hold on,
entirely irrelevant.
hold on, Gail. The reason why it doesn't matter because you just said God isn't changing, so it wouldn't matter.
No, I
If he's
never
unchanging,
said.
if he's unchanging, then he's the same God that commanded slavery. So fuck
No,
him.
that's not
But the
true.
second thing I would say, hold on,
That's
but
a
the
false
second,
entailment. Yeah, finish up.
but
Sorry.
you said he's
Wait. I
unchanging.
want you to finish your
But
argument first before we get into it.
no, you just he's unchanging. So it doesn't matter. He's unchanging. He's the same God that commanded slavery. So fuck him. But the second thing
No.
second thing I would say is that I did provide a justification. We do not prefer negative consequences. If things are if something has a negative consequence and we see the results of that negative consequence objectively, then that's what makes it wrong. If we see that PDF files touching children has a negative consequence of them going through trauma, of them not being productive, of them becoming abusers themselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that continues a perpetual cycle of negativity, that's what makes it wrong. Are you saying that negative cycles of that the wrongness is the negative cycle of is the cycle of negativity? That's the wrongness right there. Does that make
So
sense?
I get your argument, but I guess I'll just go second point first and the first point last. The second point is, as you've already stated, it is ultimately a cycle that causes negativity. And I guess my question is, why is negativity objectively wrong? And your whole statement would be it causes harm. It's like, okay, if it causes harm, why should I objectively believe harm is bad because it causes negativity? That's a circular argument. That's like me saying God is real because the Bible says so. How do we know the Bible is real? Because God says so. Obviously, that's a horrible argument, and you would rightly point that out. That's circular logic. You're doing the exact same thing. Secondly, and more importantly, or maybe not more importantly, this is actually less important because this is a bit of a tangent off from the debate. When it comes to biblical slavery, the fact that there is an old versus new covenant is entirely important. Precisely because you can read throughout the whole Bible, and multiple times God directly says to the Israelites, I have chosen you not because you're a people of moral character. No, you people are the absolute worst and the most stubborn people. I don't have the exact Bible verses on hand. I'm not like one of these evangelicals that could just spit Bible verses at you left, right, and center. But this is found in multiple verses throughout the Old Testament. And with the New Covenant, obviously, we could both agree slavery is wrong, and I have the actual objective moral justification for why, because it causes harm to God's image.
But again, God said to do it. That's the problem. If you're gonna say that it causes harm to God's image, that's not objective either. Because who cares about God's image? I don't have to care about God's image. You don't have to care about God's image. And at the end of the day, if it causes harm to God's image, why would He say to do it? Like that's a kind of a ridiculous argument. And the thing is, I'm not saying that I'm not what I'm saying is not a circular argument. You're asking why is negative consequences wrong? What I'm saying is wrong and negative are the same thing. It's like asking. Basically, what you're asking me is why is blue blue? That makes no sense.
So, no, it's not. It's ultimately not because why is blue blue, for example? Obviously, that's a ridiculous argument, and you would say that's circular. Blue is blue because it's blue. Obviously, blue is ultimately just our measurement or meaning of that specific wavelength in light,
Right.
and
And
then
negative things are wrong because they're negative.
negative things are wrong because negative. But
Because they're
my
negative.
question, my question to you is, why is it objectively negative then? And ultimately, as you stated to me earlier in the debate, morality is ultimately subjective, so that doesn't make sense. And to get back to Old Covenant versus New Covenant, God's
It's
prescriptions.
objectively negative
Wait,
because
wait.
of its
Let me
consequences.
make
Like, we're
the
gonna keep going.
let me make the argument real quick. And this is probably my last argument because I'm gonna be needed somewhere else pretty soon. So. This has been a fun chat, by the way. I hope you at least had fun. I know we don't see eye to eye on basically probably any issue. Maybe besides obviously like grape, my fault. Grape, slavery, G-side being bad, obviously, right? But ultimately, to just get back to my argument,